Hello, I'm Martin Starke, and welcome to the latest edition of the Total Saints podcast. It's where we gather together a panel of Saints experts to discuss all things relating to Southampton Football Club. And I'm sure you know this by now, but we stream each episode of TSP live on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel on a Sunday night. So if you're watching live on either of those platforms, you can get involved in the conversation by using the comments section. Coming up this week on the podcast, we'll dissect the disappointing defeat at home to Crystal Palace. And just 3 games left to go. We're going to preview the trip to Brentford at the weekend. Let me first of all introduce you to our TSP guests this week. Let's go clockwise. Steve Grant is the owner of SaintsWeb. How's your week been, Steve? Welcome back to the UK.
Yeah, it's been a busy one. Obviously flying back Monday meant I kind of had an entire week's worth of work to fit into 4 days. So it's been a little bit hectic. But yeah, got there in the end, and obviously making the most of a nice long weekend now.
Glen Johnson is the writer of the weekly Saints blog League One -10. How's the blood pressure today after yesterday?
It's all right. I kind of can't be bothered really, much like most of the players. So try not to get too angry about it. But yeah, it's been an interesting week. I got higher blood pressure this week because one of my dogs was quite ill, and I had to take him to the vet. But he seems to be making a bit of a recovery. Lots of money out of the pocket. That's
of
been,
course.
but
yeah,
absolutely. Don't want to talk about that. But no, that was the main stress of the week, and much more worth worrying about that than those clowns that played yesterday.
Than the football, yeah. And Dan Sheldon is the dedicated Southampton reporter for The Athletic. Welcome back this week, Dan. How's your week been?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Getting over the illness now, so yeah, kind of back to normal.
Good. Well, it's good to have you back. The biggest hello and thank you, of course, is reserved to our wonderful patrons, wherever you might be listening or watching this week. Welcome to episode 196 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, before we get on to yesterday's game, just a little reminder, we're going to be hosting a live podcast in Southampton to mark our 200th episode, which is coming up. It's going to be on Friday, the 27th of May, 7 o'clock start at the Five Rivers Sports Bar in Beavers Valley. The evening is going to be supporting the Saints Foundation. 100% of the ticket proceeds are going directly to the charity. If you're interested in coming along, you can find a link to the event in the description for the podcast. And we're going to be sharing that, of course, on our socials over the next few weeks. So if you've already bought your tickets, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you there. Now, it looked like we'd hold on for a point, but a late winner for the visitors in added time meant another defeat in the league for Saints. What was your take on that one yesterday, Steve?
Just frustrating, isn't it?
It's the sigh, isn't it?
Yeah,
At the moment, everything starts with a sigh.
Oh God, we've got to discuss this again. It's just what it seems to be. We get to and this has been a repeating problem for God knows how many years, that we get to the end of the season and we're kind of safe. We know that there's nothing tangible to achieve, because I'm not convinced that players care that much about one particular league position over another when there's no sort of European qualification or anything like that at stake. And yeah, I mean, we've essentially decided, afternoon in the sunshine, let's just kind of kick our shoes back and just relax a little bit. And yeah, it was frustrating. When you think you get the early lead and you think, great, we've started this one well. Let's get a grip on this, and we can have this game wrapped up by half time. And yeah, we got into the lead, and it was just like, oh, okay, well, that's our job done then. Yeah, very frustrating. And I think to be honest, I mean, credit to Zaha for the finish from that distance, but the amount of time and space that Bednarek gives him, it's like, I mean, he's got his back to goal on the edge of the area. I mean, what else is he going to try and do apart from work a yard of space and turn and shoot? There's literally nowhere else for him to go in that situation, and yet he still lets him do it. And it was just weak, and it kind of sums up his calendar year really for me. I'm very, very disappointed with him in particular. I mean, it does kind of feel like I single him out every week, but it's doing my nutting.
Well, Mark's used the word shambles. I think I've seen the word whimper as well on the comment section already, Glenn. What word would keep it clean? What word would you or words would you use to to sum up the performance yesterday? Just I think we got the defeat that we deserve. Really,
you've thrown this one at me with no preparation, so I'm going to come up with insipid. There you go. That's a good one, isn't it?
And we don't have to bleep it out for the radio either. That's good.
Not at all. It was atrocious from start to finish. I've seen it said that we were better in the first half than we were in the second. No, we weren't. We scored in the first half from a set piece, as usual. We created nothing. We did nothing going forward. 3 passes, if you're lucky, just rubbish. The midfield and the attacking players didn't put the effort in. They didn't put the effort in when we had the ball to find space for people to pass to. And they didn't do the work defensively, because what happened was basically the Palace 3 in the centre of midfield were up against Romeo and Ward-Prowse, and they were just getting dragged everywhere. They were getting no help at all from the wide players. The formation just fell apart. I mean, going right back to when Ralph started, do you remember when he got the groundsman to mark out sort of areas on the pitch, so
squares, yeah,
so he could teach the players this 4-2-2 formation, and the way that the spaces between the lines is basically crucial to it working from a defensive point of view. So the players have got to be switched on for starters, and the players have got to put the effort in to make sure they're in the right place and they run and they all, go in a cohesive manner. If you don't do that, then 4-2-2-2 is so easy to play through, and that's what Palace did. The amount of times Schlupp and Gallagher in particular were completely free, and they were just open all the time. And even a player as limited as MacArthur is could just pass the ball 20 yards forward to their feet, and then we were in trouble the whole time. The back 4 didn't cover themselves in glory on the 2 goals we conceded, but they were under pressure the whole game because there was nothing going on in front to stop to stop Palace coming through. As far as going forward was concerned, I mean, when we were playing well, Salisu would pick the ball up and he'd have options. He could go wide, he could go into centre of midfield, who wanted the ball, and he could go to the forward players along the ground. That's what we did. There's none of that now. Midfield players don't want the ball. Wingers aren't making any runs. Forwards are running forwards. They're not looking for the ball. So what do? We end up just banging it forward. And that, you keep hold of the ball maybe one time in 20. And you've got a player like, what's his name, Anderson at the back, 6'4". Oh, thanks, I'll have that. And that Mark Gurhey was totally untroubled. Made him look like Virgil van Dijk back there. He had absolutely nothing to worry about in that game at all. And it was pathetic for 90 minutes. And I wasn't even bothered when we let a goal in. When Zaha scored in the last minute, Palace deserved to win. The only reason they were pretty toothless up front in the first half. That Mateta guy was pretty useless. But as soon as they took him off and brought Zaha on, and they brought on Elise, and I just thought, my word, there's no way we're going to hold out. So it was the most unsurprising thing in the world to me that Palace scored, and unsurprising and predictable is something that I think I'm going to come back to later on.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll get on to the starting lineup and the goals. I mean, Dan, after we scored, only one team looked like they wanted to win the match and were going to score again, and it certainly wasn't Southampton.
No, not at all. As Glenn said, once they went 1-0 up, it was, that's it. We've done our jobs, and let's just play out for 90 minutes and see what happens here. It was really poor, really, really poor. It was the first game I'd seen live for a couple of weeks because I've been ill, and they were just terrible. There was just no, I mean, we've been saying they've not had any effort for a while, but there was no effort. And I really don't say this lightly, but it looked like that performance against Palace, to me, looked like Ralph had run out of ideas and the players have stopped listening. And that was what happens for 90 minutes when I mean, as Glenn said, I mean, Saints were just kicking it long. And you just think, what is the purpose of this? It was really bad, and deservedly booed off at full time. It was the worst game I've seen Southampton play in a long, long time. I mean, bearing in mind I wasn't at Burnley, so
Yeah, the bar is interesting.
It's getting
Steve,
lower every week.
Lower every week, yeah. Steve, let's talk about the starting lineup. One change, obviously, Perot coming in for Livramento, which meant that Shane Long retained his spot in the starting 11. Adam Armstrong, Brozier on the bench. Were you happy with that when the team came out? Can you? I can imagine Armstrong wasn't happy with it, but
I was kind of not overly fussed. I mean, we played okay with essentially that 11 for a large part of the second half at Brighton, and you kind of thought, well, okay, well they've actually had a game where they've looked vaguely competent, or at least, well, we've had a half where we've looked vaguely competent with that system and that lineup. So I didn't have any particular issues with sticking with Shane Long again. At the end of the day, I mean, as I said last week, we don't see what goes on in training. I can only assume that Long is basically looking like Shane Long in training. What we see, like the good parts of what we see from him when he does get a game, and Adam Armstrong is showing absolutely nothing, because otherwise, surely you'd be putting your £15 million centre forward into games like this where there's tangibly nothing to play for. And yet, yeah, I mean, there's obviously something not quite right there when, because I mean, let's be honest, we're assuming that Shane Long is out the door in the summer, out of contract as a 35-year-old. Seems fairly implausible that he's going to get a new deal. Although I'd say his kind of contributions since Christmas, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to give him a pay-as-you-play deal or something cheap, he may be worth keeping around. But I mean, he's certainly not a player who should be getting first-team starts in live Premier League games. And yeah, I mean, it kind of exposes the while we've kind of thought we had depth in squad, actually, when one or two are kind of not firing on all cylinders, even when fit. Actually, we're still kind of struggling sort of beyond the sort of first 11. And I mean, Brozier's clearly way off the pace at the moment, which is a problem. And I mean, I'm not sure it necessarily helps the manager coming out after the game saying that he's not seen enough from him when he's come on. It's like, well, yeah, okay, that
not
may
the
be
first
true.
time this season that he's said that either.
I mean, yeah, and he's tried the stick approach rather than the carrot a few times, hasn't he? And I mean, to be fair, earlier in the season he got the desired response, but it does kind of feel a little bit like sort of banging the same drum, and eventually people stop listening.
Glenn, what was your take on the starting lineup, the squad, and those coming off the bench, and obviously the lack of impact, because something's not quite right.
I was going to stay in the pub when I saw the starting lineup. To be honest,
no one would have blamed you, by the way.
There's no point in being. I mean, the two I have the issue with is Shane Long and Nathan Redmond. There's no point in being angry with those two players because they are what they are. Shane Long is a 35-year-old striker who hasn't had a half-decent season since 2016. Nathan Redmond is what he is. We know what he can do. We know what he can't do. We know what he won't do. It was predictable. They did exactly what they always do. The problem lies in, and Steve touched on it, why are they seen as being the best option in what is basically a dead rubber game? Now, okay, we discussed Adam Armstrong, but I'm looking further than that. I'm looking at players like Will Smallbone. We're supposed to be this team that looks at young players. So if someone like Nathan Redmond is preferred to Will Smallbone in what is basically a dead rubber game, what are we doing here? And as it is, he's picked the experienced players. We've been rubbish. We've lost again. It's another missed opportunity to play a young player. So I don't get that. I don't understand it. I am horrified at the thought that they will give Shane Long another year, because it just be such a colossal waste of money unless they put him on vastly reduced money and he's a coach, in a year's time or something like that.
Yeah, or an ambassador or something.
I don't, he can't have a a watching contract, like Theo Walcott's got.
Yeah.
That would just be repeating the same mistake over again. So I wasn't impressed with the starting lineup. Those two players in particular played exactly as I thought they would. But there were other players who dipped horribly below what they can do. Romeo scored the goal, but he was playing in quicksand the whole game. He was going back to being very slow at passing the ball, kept getting caught in possession. But again, lack of movement ahead. It makes, it's called pass and move for a reason. If you don't move, you can't pass the ball. Nathan Teller was poor. Che Adams was poor. So I wasn't impressed with it. The substitutions, when they did eventually come, Brozier looked like he couldn't wait to get back to Chelsea, to be honest. He tried a little bit, but he seemed to be hanging out on the left wing for some reason. I don't know if that was tactical or whether that was just where he ended up running. Stuart Armstrong did more in 5 minutes than most. It's a low bar, but at least he got the ball down and tried to play. And he had the snatch, he had the shot over the bar, and he had he created and played a 1-2 and hit that shot wide at the end. And the final insult to Adam Armstrong was the fact that we ended up with Nathan Redmond playing up front, and I think he touched the ball once, and it was just poor. So I don't know. I mean, Ralph can blame the players for not making an impact all they want, and he can bemoan the lack of quality. He picks the team, and that's the team he picked, and it just, we didn't look like we had a clue. And I hadn't really thought about it until Dan said it. It does look like they aren't listening, or they can't be bothered, or he can't get through to them. You can talk about formations all you like. Again, I think the mindset and the attitude from the players was such that it wouldn't have mattered what formation we put out there. It still would have been pretty awful. But Ralph's got to look at himself. It's not good enough in my book. Maybe he is, but it's not good enough in my book just to throw certain players under the bus when you've picked the team, and that was entirely predictable how it would turn out.
We'll come back to Ralph in a sec. Dan, I just want to, at the start of the season, he was talking about how he wanted 2 players for each position, but it seems that maybe he doesn't trust the bench, perhaps, or have they just recruited badly? Because
I'd settle for 1.
He was saying, yesterday he said, I expect more from my guys coming on, and he didn't make any changes again. He's been a bit reluctant to make changes in games. So is he just not perhaps trusting the players that he's brought in, or are they just not doing enough when they do get the time?
Well, I think it goes back to a point that Steve made earlier. I mean, we're not watching training, so we're not seeing day in, day out what these players are or are not doing at Staplewood. But the players he brought on yesterday were good enough to make an impact. They were good enough to change the game. They push Saints on or whatever. Brozier, we've seen what he can do. Stuart Armstrong, one of the club's better players, you'd argue. I think Elianusi came on towards the end. He's had an okay season, better than many thought he probably would have done. They're not 3 poor players he's brought on, but they just came on, and Armstrong aside, just didn't look all too bothered by what was going on. I think it goes deeper than just the substitutions and not making changes. There's clearly an issue, or there's something is completely broken down from whatever Southampton are trying to do. And one of the things that I know that the club was so keen to avoid happening, and they were kind of talking about this in sort of Jan time as well, when that good run, was capitalizing on that and not letting the season fizzle out. That was the one thing they didn't want to happen this season, because it happened last year, probably happened the year before that, I can't remember. Project Restart was all right, actually, but before Project Restart, the season was fizzing out because they were on a poor run of form, and it's happened again. They've missed an opportunity to, how many points off Tottenham were they when they beat Tottenham? It was like 2 or 3 points off Tottenham. It was something silly, wasn't it? Like Tottenham they were within a win of catching Tottenham. Not that they would have caught them, but now look at them. It speaks of mentality. It speaks of coaching. And I asked Ralph after the game, because he spoke about the level they were at, but then kind of said, but we didn't even reach any kind of level today. and it's about trying to. And he's like, whenever we get to this position, we fail, and we need to make that next step. And then I said, well, how do you make that next step? Is it your coaching? Is it better players, or investment? And he was like, everything, all of the above, basically. So
yeah. Steve, is it a case of just fine margins? Because at one point yesterday we were 9th in the table, and then by 5 o'clock we're 15th. I think we're 3 points off 10th as it stands. Is there a danger that we're overreacting, or is it as bad as we're making out?
Well, I mean, the 90 minutes yesterday was as bad as people make out. I don't think you can really kind of sugarcoat it. But I mean, it's odd that, I mean, we've basically had 3 really strange seasons, and next season's going to be even stranger still, with a 6-week break in smack bang in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's going to be any kind of sense of what is normal until probably another 18 months, 2 years time. It's a difficult one. I mean, even in this kind of bad run, there's been halves or 10-20 minute spells in games where you can see, okay, right, we've got ourselves sorted. Now let's kind of push on, and then something happens and we collapse and just fall into bad sort of bad ways again. And I think part of it comes back to something that I said, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, about that actually the players that we've got, their mentality is of players of the level that we are. That's why we're so wildly inconsistent. That if they're all on it, and the system is set up in such a way to negate what a potentially stronger opposition is bringing to the table, then yeah, sure, we can compete with pretty much everyone. I mean, as we've said, we've drawn 2 games.
We've shown that,
drawn 2 games against City, who are still likely to win the league. And I mean, should have won at least one of those games. So we have the capability of doing it, but I think there's a mentality thing which basically, once you get to when you're a player that's playing at the very, very top, you have that you have the mental strength and the ability to get through tough periods of whether it's bad form or recover from an individual mistake or things like that. Whereas players at only ever so slightly lower level just don't quite have the mental attitude to get through those phases. And that's basically why we are so wildly inconsistent. That you can go from an almighty high, and actually we've at times maintained those highs for like a month, 6 weeks at a time. Even when we've had tough fixture lists, key players being injured, suspended, or whatever, and yet there is just this kind of nagging feeling of at this point when we're on the 1st of May, and it's like, well, this is just the same old, isn't it? And it's just immensely frustrating, really. I mean, as we mentioned, I mean, this summer is going to be a huge sort of barometer of where this new ownership kind of sees the club. Are they going to? Is there going to be significant investment to make I don't know. I mean, half a dozen potential actual first team signings that would give us the quality and ultimately the depth that'll allow us to actually swap in and out players who are in that sort of little slump of form, and you're able to swap them out and not affect things too much. I mean, only time will tell on that.
And do you think that's the case, Glenn? As Steve says, limping through till May almost, and then seeing what the new owners want to do and how many players we need to come in. Is it a bit of an overhaul? Neil's watching on YouTube and he says, what needs to change? Is it an overhaul in the summer for you?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think certainly if you look at the squad of senior first team players, we got too many passengers who, if you see them on the team sheet, you just think, oh my word, what's going on? I mean, I mentioned 2 of them earlier on, but there's 4 or 5 of them who you just wouldn't be terribly happy To flip it round, at the moment, I only see about 6, maybe 7 players that we've got who I would be upset if they left. There's a lot of them that I just wouldn't be bothered about. As Steve said, weak mentality on quite a few of them. Some have moments, but they're not consistent enough to be reliable first team players. We've just played Palace. Palace are an interesting example. They spent a lot of money in the summer, but they cleared out a lot of their deadwood, if you like. A lot of players came to the end of their contracts, like Gary Cahill and Scott Dan, to name but two very highly paid players who they'd had for years or had for a while, and they got rid of them and they replaced them with the 2 centre halves they got now. Okay, they spent a bit of money, but they probably saved on wages. So that's the sort of thing that I think we need to do, is to, don't renew contracts of players who have been here for a while and they're not going to get any better. But it is difficult for a club of our size to make 6 or 7 signings who are going to be, first team contenders, because it will cost a lot of money. I mean, you're talking probably 100 million plus. So we've got to save that money or make that money from somewhere. And obviously we don't want to sell one of the good players in order to do that. We want to save it by getting rid of some of the deadwood and saving money on wages that way.
Yeah, but selling James Ward-Prowse is not the answer, is it?
No, it wouldn't be. But
no matter how much we talk about it on Talk Sport.
but we have to. If you listen to that, then then you deserve all you get. People like that idiot Jamie O'Hara and Gabby Bonlahor. My word, I just watched the little clips on Twitter.
Well, I've set him off now.
I've set him shoot myself.
It's impressive how Gabby Bonlahor is actually as thick as he sounds.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive, and they see that as a reason to put him on the radio. But there you go. But back to us. Yes, we do need a bit of an overhaul, and as I say, there are too many players for me who were stinking the place out, and we just need to move on from those sort of players. I mean, just off the top of my head, Walcott, we're not getting any value from whatsoever. Gineppo's never going to do it. It's just not. Even first team regulars, like Steve's mentioned Bednarek. If we can sell Bednarek for whatever 10, 15 million quid or whatever, and use the money and the wages to buy, a better centre half, someone like Anderson or Gerhi, someone like, obviously we can't sign those two, but someone of that ilk for, a little bit more money, then that's what we need to do. There's going to be some hard decisions, and some first team players might be leaving, but we got to make sure we get it right. Otherwise, we are going to be severely struggling, and we need to find a goal scorer, because we had a little purple patch from Brozier and Adams, which unfortunately happened at roughly the same time. And we had those wins, but if you look at their goal output at the end of the day, it's 6 and 7 in each.
Not scored since February in the league.
That's just not enough. We haven't replaced the goals that Danny Ings scored. We just haven't, and we've had a few from midfield with Prowse with the set pieces, obviously, and we've had the odd contribution from Elyounoussi and Armstrong, but it's just not enough, and it's not sustainable. So if it's not going to be Brozier, or if it is him, he needs to score more goals next year, and if it's not him, we need to find some way of the forward line contributing more goals than they have this year. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really tough.
Kilkenny Saint is watching on YouTube. He agrees, Glenn. He says, need to clear out in the summer. A lot of these players we know aren't really up to the standard. Matthew's been asking Dan, are we safe? And that's a really interesting one, because at the moment, I don't know where we're going to get another point from. And it looks like, obviously, Everton and Burnley as well have picked up a bit of a run in form. Are we going to be all right, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, technically speaking, no, they're not safe. But I do think they are. They are safe, yeah. I think they won't go. I'm going to say they won't go down. Southampton won't go down. I mean, if they go down, then it will be absolutely remarkable.
There's the clip to the internet.
Yeah, they're not safe mathematically, but I would be genuinely shocked. I mean, they could still very much finish 17th, but I don't think they'll go down. I really don't think they'll go down.
It's a bit of a 6-pointer, Steve, almost at the weekend.
God, it's not a 6-pointer.
It's a must-win game.
Losers back in the relegation mix. Let's get on to the Brentford game because put it behind us and move on. I mean, that was a cracking game at St Mary's back in January, Steve. The 4-1 when we welcomed the new owners and the place was buzzing. It seems like that was a very long time ago now.
Yeah, and Brentford were absolutely pathetic that night, weren't they? And they were in the middle of a run of absolutely horrendous form, where they looked like, obviously having had a good start to the season, they basically looked like they were struggling to see where their next point was coming from. And then the Christian Eriksen signing happened, and once he got up to full speed, I mean, they've been a completely different side with him in that team. I think getting their first choice keeper back has been quite important as well, because I think the reserve guy they had in for a while looked pretty ropey. But yeah, I mean they've turned around the corner, and they're looking like a good side again. But I mean they're not unbeatable by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, as we showed back in January, I mean, we gave an absolute spanking that night, didn't we? And what was it? 4-1 could have been 7 or 8 quite easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we've just got to sort out this mental block. I mean, maybe playing against a team that plays a very open game will help us. Maybe that will give us a little bit more space to work in. But you can imagine that while you'll kind of get a little bit of space, you won't necessarily have time, because they obviously like to play this high energy style as well. And I think ultimately we've got to make sure that I mean, you would imagine that someone's going to be man marking Eriksen, surely, because no, I mean,
you think?
Well, I mean, this is the weird thing that from what I've seen, I don't think anybody's really been doing that against them so far. And I guess that there's an issue where man marking an individual player does kind of take that one player take your own defender or defensive midfielder out of the game completely in any kind of other useful sense. So it's always something that you kind of don't really want to use too often if you can get away with it. But and from what I've seen from Brentford's games with him there, if you stop the supply from him, there's kind of not a whole lot else. And actually, that should be an avenue that we should possibly look to target, because defensively Brentford are still pretty poor. I mean, let's be honest, we scored 4 against them. So defensively they're clearly not all that great. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason why we can't go there and get something against them, but we just need to kind of get that cohesion back between the midfield and the strikers, because what we've had basically for a month is whoever has been playing up front has just been left so isolated. There's a huge gap between the midfield and whoever's playing up top. I mean, that Chelsea game, Brozier, I mean, I don't think anyone was within 40 yards of him for most of that game.
No.
And it was, I mean, yeah, we were obviously on the back foot defensively, but there was no way that we were getting out. And yeah, we've got to get more support to whoever we play up front. Maybe it's a game where you go with the 2 guys that didn't start yesterday. So you go with Brozier and Adam Armstrong, maybe. Again, it's a game where you've kind of, after a fairly insipid performance yesterday for the most part, maybe it's another one where you've got to shake things up again and say, right, okay, well, you guys didn't put the performance in, so okay, right, we'll swap out the entire attack, and yeah, see how the others go. Yes, maybe Smallbone, Stu Armstrong, perhaps. Maybe, yeah, just try something different.
Yeah, Glenn Mark says time for Smallbone, Diallo and Armstrong to start. Who comes in for you? What are the changes you'd like to see for this one?
I don't know. Yesterday was
just a team that turns up would be nice, wouldn't
it? Yeah, yesterday was that bad. I mean, Stuart Armstrong, I think, has to come back in. I think Brozier has to come back in. I'd prefer to see Brozier and Adams up front, because Adam Armstrong is not going to suddenly force his way into the first team. He can't even get off the bench at the moment. So I would like to see Lianco tried maybe instead of Bednarek, just to see what he's like playing in a 4. I would maybe like to see that. But other than that, we haven't got a lot of choices. I mean, Diallo seems to have disappeared altogether since Ramadan started. So whether he's sort of ready to play, I don't even know if that's finished yet, to be honest. Sorry, that's
this week. This week is a
bit ignorant of me, that is. But it will be a tough game against Brentford. They remind me of Saints under Alan Ball, when basically it was give the ball to Letitia and every second pass or whatever it was. That's what they do with Ericsson, and if we don't get to grips with him, I mean, it's no Ivan Toney started scoring now, hasn't he? And he's scored more than any of our strikers, and he went something like 20 games without a goal. It's all been since Ericsson came in and totally transformed that team. So whilst no one's a one-man team, as Steve said, we do need to look after him, because if we don't, and if we allow him the space that, for example, we allowed Mason Mount playing in that sort of position against Chelsea, we're just going to get stuffed again. We have to get it right defensively with regards to Ericsson. Otherwise, we're really going to have trouble. So whether you play 3 in the centre of midfield and detail Diallo, for argument's sake, to follow him everywhere, that may be what we do. But then, should you change your whole system to accommodate one player? That's another question, and that's why Ralph's paid considerably more money than us to get those decisions right, and let's hope he does.
Fingers crossed. Dan, what have you made of Brentford this season? Obviously, they've had some good wins, they've had some bad wins. Personally, looking at this one, thinking this is our best chance to pick up a couple of points, because we've got Liverpool and Leicester just around the corner. So it's not going to be an easy one at the weekend.
No, it could very well be the last chance for Southampton to pick up points. Although stranger things have happened. You wouldn't, in a weird way, you wouldn't bet against them doing something crazy against Liverpool. I don't know.
Beating Liverpool and handing
I would.
No
chance.
But in terms of Brentford, I think they did that thing at the beginning of the season where it's like new team, everything is, no one really knows what they are, and they were really good. Then they really kind of just middled out and were terrible. And at one point I thought they might end up going down, because I just didn't see where their next win was going to come from. And I thought they'd really get sucked into it. And then, as the guys have already said, they signed Christian Eriksen, who, let's be honest, could still be performing at one of the Premier League's top sides. I think he's that good. And it's changed their season. I think, was it 5 wins in their last 7 now? They've gone from looking like they could get sucked into it to being absolutely fine. I really like Thomas Frank. I think he's a good manager. Every time I've seen him talk, I've been impressed by him. I know a couple of people that know him quite well, and they're always speaking very highly of him and his methods. And yeah, I mean, if Southampton turn up and play the way they played against Palace, they will get absolutely rolled over by Brentford. I wouldn't bet against that happening at all. To me, it's almost like the worst time to play them. But then there was a golfing quality and golfing class at St Mary's, and we all know if Southampton turn up, they can give any team in this league a real good go. It just is what team turns up. And we've all sat here and thought, what players would you bring in? At the moment, they're all as bad as each other. I mean, play James Ward-Prowse up front. He's the only one that's scoring. Try him up front. Why not?
Yeah. So I think when the new owners came in that game, we were begging him to open his checkbook and spend £30 million on Brozier, weren't we?
I made a joke in my piece actually for tomorrow. I think Dragon donated 10 grand, didn't he? Just over 10 grand to the Saints
Foundation. To the Saints Foundation this week. Yeah,
he'll have to dig an awful lot deeper, won't he, to fix the on-field problems. I mean, when he was there at St Mary's, and he was probably thinking, "God, it's going to cost a lot more than 10 grand to solve this." Yeah.
It's been contrasting, isn't it? you know what's coming next. I'm going to ask you for predictions. I feel like we started this, so we have to finish it and we have to see it through. We always say what team's going to turn up. Steve, do you want to go first with a prediction for the game?
I mean, to be honest, I'll quite happily bite your arm off for a dull as hell 0-0 draw.
Just to get us to 41 points.
Yep, that'll do.
Glenn?
Yeah, same regarding, I would hope for a draw, but I will go for a 2-0 defeat.
And Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 Brentford.
Oh gosh, right, okay.
I love that we're more optimistic against opposition like Man United than we are against.
I'll be backing
Brentford.
Saints to beat Liverpool.
It's what they've done to us. It's what they've done to us. A couple of other bits before we finish. I just want to touch on the Tino Livramento story this week, Glenn. It was confirmed that he's going to be out until January 2023. Bad news for the team, but dreadful news for him as well. Someone that was absolutely flying.
Yeah, and he's had a great first season, and I know he's put a little bit on social media about the support that the club are giving him and the fans are giving him and stuff like that. And it is unfortunately just one of those things that happens in football from time to time, and you know it's whoever it happens to, it's always grim. I guess the good news is that he is young enough that he, if it happens to a player in his early 30s or something, you're struggling a little bit to get back to the level. So there is no reason, with the way that these injuries are repaired these days, that he shouldn't get back to the level he was at and be able to push on. So it's a positive that he's young, but it's a horrible thing to happen to anybody. It's irritated me a little bit that the Brighton fans have been painted as some sort of they realised there was a problem straight away. No, they didn't. They booed because the referee stopped the game.
Yeah.
So I'm not having that. But that's
and you were there.
I was there. So that's a small point. But good luck to Tino, and it's going to be. I mean, I guess he won't miss as many games because of the World Cup if he comes back as the in January or whatever is being predicted. Then there'll be a fair chunk of the season left. But it'd be interesting to see what Saints do with regarding fullbacks, because you've still got Jan Valery at the moment as a backup, and
not a fullback anymore for me.
No, not really. But then and Thierry Small didn't look remotely ready in the cup game that he played against Coventry. Got hooked at half time, didn't he? So you would imagine they will be looking either for a right back or a left back to.
Going to say, did you write about that this week, Dan? Was that your piece about how we were going to bring in a defender? Now you think it might be looking at the fullback options?
Well, they want a central defender. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they now have to sign a fullback for the reasons the guys have just said. There's just no one else there now, is there? Valery's clearly they see him as a centre half. Thierry Small scored,
but only in a 3 as well.
But yeah, only in a 3. So to me, unless they think, as Glenn said, there's a World Cup, there's going to be a big gap where we haven't got to play. Tino could come back in January. Do you just try and wing it? I personally wouldn't adopt that.
We can't be playing James Ward-Prowse at right back, can we? Again?
No,
we need it.
No. So it'll be interesting what they do in the summer with the fullback. That's for sure.
Quick word on the women's team, Steve. Another win today, finishing their campaign in style, and the manager picking up the Manager of the Month award, which was good to see.
Yeah, excellent. Another good win. Was it 4-1? I think against Cardiff this afternoon. Yep. So yeah, I think they won the league by 6 points in the end. Ipswich managed to somehow finish third in a 2-horse race, and yeah, Oxford just overtook them on the final day. I think Ipswich lost at Pompey today, which was a bit of a surprise. But yeah, it's been an excellent season. I mean, they've won 2 trophies. Should have been 3 really. I still find the whole Hampshire Cup withdrawal absolutely baffling, given the size of squad they've got. But yeah, the big one is to come. What, in 3 weeks' time? At Stockport. I mean, I do find it another weird thing with the scheduling there, that you've got a 3-week gap between the end of the season and that game. Why? There's no reason why that game couldn't have been scheduled literally the week after the the end of the season, especially as the winners of the two respective leagues have been sewn up for a couple of weeks. I mean, Wolves' case, I think they won it about a month ago. Such was the lead that they had. So yeah, it's slightly strange. I mean, I guess Wolves are in the same position, so there's no advantage to anybody. But yeah, it's a bit odd that now you're left with three kind of dead weeks. I mean, maybe they'll squeeze some friendlies and things like that in to kind of keep everyone fresh. But it's not the same as going straight into a playoff final when the momentum, both teams have got momentum from winning competitive games. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out at Stockport.
It was good to see them with the silverware at the game yesterday. That was one of the highlights, parading around with the silverware.
It's the only highlight.
The only highlight yesterday. Yeah, no, that's also fair. Before we finish, as always, a big shout out to some of our patrons in our various tiers. In our Matt Letizier tier, we've got Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Phil Cook, and Nick Higston. In the Francis Benali tier, Nick Reed, Matt Hall, and David Melton. To find out more about becoming a TSP patron, you can check out the website. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Dan. Let's hope there's better things to talk about next week, more cheerful stuff. Don't forget to follow this podcast wherever you're listening on the socials. It's at Total Saints Pod on Twitter and Facebook, and of course you can get in touch during the week via the website as well. Final reminder as well about our TSP 200, the live show, which is happening on Friday the 27th of May. That's at the Five Rivers Sports Bar in support of the Saints Foundation. The link is in the description of the podcast if you want to grab your tickets for that. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great week. We'll see you again soon.